Hi everyone, welcome to Casual Watch Talk Live on a Tuesday. Going to do we've got a couple of news stories, but we're definitely going to do a Q&A, so keep those questions coming. But before we do that, we'll do a bit of a wristwatch check. Peter, you're in the hot seat.
I'm in the hot seat. I am wearing my JLC Polaris with the green enamel dial.
Oh, so
Very nice.
Because if you've got this watch, why wouldn't you wear it?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Fair enough.
It really is.
Can't find much to argue with that one, Pete.
No. Yeah, it's really nice. I really like that one. Mark, what are you wearing?
I have a new to me Mido Ocean Star GMT.
Awesome.
I'll call it the Pepsi version. It does have the little red dial. I wanted another GMT. I wanted a modern one, and this is the one I found.
And that's Sam's favorite version of GMT, isn't it? That's the diver GMT with the diver bezel.
It does have a dive bezel on it. You're quite right, Pete.
Yeah. Sam absolutely loves those GMTs.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite. It would only be better if it didn't have the date on it.
That's right.
It was dateless. Yeah. So is it ETA in those Midos, or is it this?
It's a Powermatic 80. So because Mido is part of Swatch, so it's a modified Powermatic 80, and they shoved a Traveler GMT module onto it. So.
Awesome. Cool.
I'm going to be fascinated. I'm going to be fascinated in a couple of years' time when the Traveler configuration is normal, and that's what most watches come with. And then people buy those as GMTs and then realize that they are total pains in the ass when you're not traveling.
They are more difficult to set up if you have to set them up from dead, because you have to set the time by the GMT hand and the minute hand. Then you go back to position 1 to set the hour hand. And of course, there's no date correction. You have to keep on winding the hour hand round till you get the date. So if you don't wear them all the time, they can be a bit of a pain to set up. But, the first time you try and do it would be possibly the only time I'd reach for a watch manual to start up a watch, because it took me a few minutes to figure out why I couldn't set the time.
And
I just didn't get the logic.
I think there's a lot of people who are yelling up and jumping up and down that all GMTs should be Travelers, and then in a couple of years' time, when the snobbishness around being a true GMT has died down, and the realities of living with one on a day-to-day basis start to become more apparent, people are going to start pining for the good old days when we had Caller GMTs that were really handy, except for that 1 or 2 times a year when you traveled.
Yeah.
I'm confused about this now. So mine's a GMT as well, so I'll do my wristwatch check the same.
Yep.
And I like it because you set the GMT hand to whatever, you leave it, and then you just move the out. Your first position is where the hour hand just moves back and forth, which is good because you can knock it back 3 hours if you go into a different time zone. But I always have the GMT. So what is that? Is that a Traveler GMT?
That's a Traveler. Yeah,
that's a Traveler.
Okay. I like that one. Are we saying we don't like it? Are we decided we don't like it, or we like it? I like it.
I like it when I'm traveling. I don't like it when I'm at home.
Okay. Well, both of mine have been quartz. So both of mine have been quartz. So you set it and forget it. So that's maybe why I'm not feeling the pain.
And I think that's why. It's a pain when, imagine if it was mechanical and you only wore it once or twice a week. Every time you set it, you have to set the 24-hour hand first, then change the local hand.
And then change the date.
And then change the date.
And you do that by constantly rotating the hour hand through until you get the date that you want. So when I got this on Monday, the date was the 7th. So I had to wind it through to the 18th. Which was just like, I'm just twisting into it. It's like, okay, you get there eventually. And then, but if you miss the date changeover, at least you can just go back, because it'll go backwards and forwards on the day.
Yeah. my GS. I think I don't know if it's perpetual calendar, but it definitely yeah, you definitely set it and forget it. I mean, it is keeping very accurate time. So maybe because both of mine have been quartz, so maybe that's why I'm not feeling the pain with it. Okay, well, we've got some questions coming in already. Actually, we'll do a question first. So I'll have to find this one. So SJ says, can you talk about the Seiko Astron dual time? I'm a mechanical watch guy collector, but the features of the dual time Astron are amazing for a person who travels internationally and flies below the radar. Let's have it. Should we just pull that up so we can have a look? I actually like these. I saw these in Japan actually. The dual times. I actually like them. So let's have a quick.
I think as part of the rehabilitation of quartz that's happening, the Astron collection is becoming part of the conversation with Seiko. I think for a long time, if we spoke about Seiko, you spoke about mainline Seiko, Prospects, Presage, and you kind of ignored Astron and Cultura. Is it Cultura?
Cultura, yeah.
Cultura. You kind of ignored those. They were mall brands. But I'm sensing in my waters that Astron is now joining the kind of enthusiast discussion. Yeah. Having said that, I apologize, SJ. I can't really say anything about the Astron. I've sensed it's becoming a topic, but I haven't actually joined in it, so I haven't really followed it.
Yeah, because wasn't the first ever quartz Seiko? I think the first ever quartz Seiko was called Astron. Was an Astron.
Yeah.
Was the Astron model. That was the first, the mechanical watch killer. I have seen these in person. I haven't handled one. They're in a display case, but I really like the look of them.
I
quite like them.
I think the confusion of subdials. So, from 10 until 2 looks great. It would take me a while to get used to the confusion of subdials, and I might get tired of that. But in terms of if you want a high quality, high function watch, Seiko, Citizen, Casio, if you find the style you like, I don't think you can go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at the details of this watch, so it's probably doing a whole bunch of date stuff that I'm not really interested in. So, but I mean, if they're functions you want, and some people don't like a mixing and matching of the way that information is displayed. So if I'm seeing that picture right, it looks like it's got a pointer day, but just a date window.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't like that, but now it's getting down to like what you personally like.
Preference.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, then let's flip to the first. While we're waiting for more questions to come in, let's flip to our first news story. So we've got a new Oris diver chronograph. Was the previous one to this just in the bronze, or is this the first steel? What's so special about it?
I think they had a steel one before, but it was 43 mil. So they have downsized it to 40.
Nice.
I don't know if it's still Valjoux based. I presume it is. None of the articles I read earlier today were actually that clear. Maybe I wasn't paying attention for the
Asleep the SW510.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's a Valjoux 777XX clone.
Yeah.
Means it won't be a very thin watch, but it's a good, reliable movement. It probably only winds one way, so it might have rotor wobble if that worries you. But we all know that watches, the trends in watches are to smaller sizes, and a 40 mil Oris diver. There's nothing wrong with the design. There's nothing exciting about it. There's nothing wrong with it. Oris is perfectly functional, perfectly good design. I kind of like it. Bit on the small side for me. I like a chronograph to be 42, but that's a very neat, functional piece of chronograph design. It's very Oris.
Yeah, I found myself. You were using all the same words I was using. I tend to be watches like this make me talk in the like what's the word? Sort of in the double negative. I can't say I like it, but I can firmly say I don't dislike this watch. I can clearly say that this watch is in no way offensive.
I mean, it doesn't have the date, but you know, if someone gave me one of these to wear for a week, I certainly wouldn't complain.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but then on the other hand, if it was in my watch, it's this weird position of if someone said this is the only watch you could wear for a week, it'd be perfectly fine.
Yep.
But if this is sitting in my watch box with lots of other more interesting stuff, why would I ever pick it out? Why would I ever wear it?
Or I would look at any of the 3 or 4 other chronographs that it would be competing with.
Yeah.
And this would be the one that, you know, if you thought you were going to get knocked about, this is the one you'd wear because you really wouldn't care what happened to it.
Yeah. So would it be the somebody's mentioned it? Tudor Pelagos Chrono. SJ mentioned, and I was thinking that would probably be because this is 4,500 or something, so that puts it right in Tudor Chrono territory, doesn't it?
I was about to ask what the price was. This is the.
Well, it looks about 4,500 judged on the build quality, but let's see. 4,400.
Close. This is the new Oris pricing model. This is, you know, they came out with a revised altimeter watch that was 6,000. So this is the new Oris price model.
It's more than you might feel comfortable paying for an Oris, but if Oris want to grow, they've got to put their prices up. I don't know what a Black Bay Chrono is. Black Bay Chrono is going to be a better watch.
Yeah.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
in that it's going to have the Breitling derived movement. It's going to be a little bit thinner. It's going to have a longer power reserve. It's going to be anti-magnetic.
Expensive.
It's going to have now. There are long-term maintainability issues about the column wheel, but it's going to feel nicer to operate. It's going to be a little bit crisper, a little bit cleaner.
It's a more distinctive design, I feel.
The Oris.
What's that?
The Tudor. But it's close. They're both quite derivative. You know, they are to a formula.
Yeah. If someone had said there was a mil spec if someone had said this was a mil spec watch, you'd probably believe it. It's got that look.
Yeah. Do you know what? So 2 people commented on our last Tudor FXD video that Tudor's been having QC issues, but I haven't heard anything. Have you ever? I've
heard little low grade rumbles about just lots of little things, but nothing no one that's yelling from the rooftops.
Yeah. Awesome. Here we go. So Thomas is coming in. We've got a couple of news stories too, but Thomas is coming in with what are each of the panel's favorite vintage watches 30 years or older, and why do you like that watch so much? God, vintage.
I've got boxes full of vintage watches, and I love them all, and they all change at different points. At the moment, what I would say is right now, my favorite vintage watches are Breitling chronographs from the early 1970s, because they are fun and exciting and interesting, and they've got all the hope and the optimism that encaptured the early 1970s before everyone got really cynical and thought that nothing's ever going to get better. So that's why I like designs from the 70s. They embody hope, not cynicism.
Yeah, so is it? So I was just trying to look for someone Chrono 24 there. So, like the Chronomatic.
Yeah, like the Chronomatic. There's a very specific one I'm looking for that I've got. I've got a sort of a search going for. They only crop up very, very occasionally. So there isn't one on Chrono 24 at the moment. it's this weird asymmetric dial where everything's not quite where it's supposed to be, where there's all the sub dials. So it's that base. So if you open that one up, I've got that watch.
I remember.
But there's a version of that where all the sub dials are weird trapezoidal shapes and spiraling off into, sort of 1970s neo future retro futurism. That's the one I've got my eye on. They come up really very rarely.
Yeah.
Most of them explode. Most of them exploded due to an unreliable movement, I take it.
Probably.
This one's
probably
beautiful.
The beauty of having a large collection is you manage reliability issues by keeping the duty cycle really low.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, Mark, your question to you: 30 years or older.
Mark doesn't do
You've got that the Citizen,
which it's probably 28 years old, but it's close. The only other watches I would have that were older would be things that I've inherited. So I have my father's Omega Genève, which I know he had that more than 30 years ago. And I have a family pocket watch that dates from around 1900. But I don't see the attraction for me of buying an old watch. There's so much choice and so little budget for new watches that I don't see the need to dive into vintage. You could say that my Speedmaster Mark II is based on a vintage watch, but very much brought up to date with materials and technology, and taking that 70s design and making it relevant again for 10 years ago when it was released. But in terms of that special feeling or that desire to hunt for something of my birth year, I know how old I am. I don't need reminding with a watch from my birth year. And I just prefer modern watches to vintage ones. And, I don't know if I'm alone in that. It seems in the watch world, I am unusual in having that position because everybody seems to have a vintage crush and I don't.
I don't necessarily seek out vintage watches. I mean, my favorite that I've got is the speed timer that Seiko Todd sorted out for me with the blue dial, and then I bought that little Grand Seiko in Japan, but I thought that was very fitting, which is coming back from the Seiko. I should have it. It's coming back from John Sachs, the Seiko Restorer, because it had a little bit of an issue, even though it had been serviced. So I suppose that's another risk of it. So those are probably my ones. God, what would if I could have any vintage watch? What would I have? I have been burnt a couple of times. I bought my hero, which was the Omega X33, the Gen 1, and I just wasn't feeling it at all in person.
I think the Gen 2 was nicer, I thought. I guess if I had to be pushed and say a vintage watch over 30 years, I would go for mid 1960s Speedmaster, or what was the Speedmaster with the original 321.
Oh yeah. So were they the Ed White ones? No.
They're the ones the Ed White is based on. Yeah.
Yeah.
The current Ed White, anyway. So it's a CK something or other reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, there's no logic to preferring vintage watches. In fact, it's profoundly illogical. It is not an opinion that there's no opinion. There's no facts underpinning the discussion. There's no logical argument putting it together. It's all just you either have the feeling or you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when people who play records are like, well, they captured more. Was it more frequencies than a CD or something? There was always an argument, wasn't there? There was a richer sound from a vinyl, but
yeah.
But and we had this discussion, I think, on Sunday. It is a trope of social media. Particularly the written sort. but you must aspire to vintage. And no.
Yeah, one of my problems with that is the vintage. And I think I've discussed it on this channel before. The way they talk about vintage, places like Monochrome and Fratello, the way they talk about vintage is really, they set an impossibly high bar, and I think I hold them responsible for scaring a lot of people away from vintage watches. They this whole, everything has to be perfect, and you've got to make sure you don't have any service parts, and you've got to make sure you got this, and you've got to make sure you got that. None of that's important. Only if you are an Eric Wind style, I want to go to, well, as it turns out, auction houses are dens of iniquity that can't be trusted anyway. So why care? Why care about any of that stuff? Just buy watches that look fun, and hope that they're okay inside.
And then there's the other side of the vintage, and this mainly affects the Rolex, the Pateks, is that you're not buying a watch, you're buying an illiquid investment. So every conversation is about value rather than about.
That's right. And again, and that's why I actually got into a bit of a low key argument with a relatively famous watch folk, because I said that the Rolex Daytona is a fundamentally, utterly unimportant watch that's very expensive. That there's nothing revolutionary about the Rolex. It didn't in any way, shape, or form shape the modern chronograph. There is precisely zero horologically significant about the Rolex. If the Rolex Daytona had never existed, the watch world would look exactly like it does now. It's an unimportant watch, but it's very expensive.
Yeah. Yes, that's actually would be quite a good video. Yeah, and speaking of vintage watches, if you ever picked up a vintage Rolex, I mean, the bracelets were probably on par with. You'd think it was if you put a Rolex bracelet in one hand and a vintage Seiko bracelet in another, you'd struggle to tell the difference, I think. But anyway, okay. So next question is, here we go. SJ, thanks for another question. What do you guys think of Grand Seiko? I think they've been hitting it out the park the last 3 years, but people still don't seem in the same light as the Swiss. Yeah, I don't know, SJ, if you saw my video on my trials and tribulations with Grand Seiko recently, but I'll pass it to
I've spoken too much. Mark, you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mark, have you ever looked at one seriously in anger or in lust?
I've looked at them a couple of times in the NYC boutique. I've looked at them at Watch Time. I find that the quality is excellent. A lot of the time, the designs don't fit what I want to buy. I like lume on a watch. Quite a lot of their watches don't have it.
Yep.
They don't, and this is all me. It's all me tonight. So this is my take. I liked their watches better when they were first being pushed by Seiko 5-6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. I find that their designs are moving away from what I like, or if they have a design I like, they have it in a size I don't.
Yeah.
But you look at them and the quality is spectacular. If you've got a spring drive, the timekeeping will be spectacular. If you're into Grand Seiko, you will be utterly convinced that they blow anything Swiss out of the water. And there's a good chance you're right. If you believe that the Swiss watch industry is the be-all and end-all of watchmaking, you will never believe that Grand Seiko can be as good as any old Swiss watch. But to be fair, having handled them a little bit, price for price, it really is hard to tell them apart from their Swiss counterparts. SJ, you're right. People still don't see them in the same light as the Swiss, and it's pure Swiss snobbery. Yeah. I don't, I would, if they made one that I really wanted, I would be happy to buy it and wear it as any watch in my collection.
Yeah, I think there's a difficulty with assessing Grand Seiko, and that is we tend to measure them against sort of their price competitors. So we look at a Grand Seiko and we compare it in our heads, or quite often, quite explicitly, to a Rolex, to an Omega, whatever. Now, this number's a little bit old, so I'm not sure it's entirely accurate. But from what I understand, we all know Rolex makes about 1 million watches a year. We know that Omega makes something in the order of 650 to 700,000 watches a year. Until only 2 or 3 years ago, Grand Seiko's annual production was 50,000 watches. I understand now it's still only around 75,000 watches a year. They only make as many watches a year as Patek. And that's, in a way, that's an important consideration. Because they're about the same price as Rolex, we tend to compare them to Rolex and other brands in that world. But Grand Seiko's actually playing a completely different game. They're not trying to be Rolex. They're not trying to be Omega. Not trying to take some crown or win some, watch World Cup. And I think because they're not playing by the same rules, because they're not trying to achieve the things that the Swiss watch industry is trying to achieve, it becomes difficult to assess them, because the rules, it's like they're playing to a different rule set. They score goals in a different way. And if you walk into it saying, I really like Rolex and this is how I like my watches to be, and Grand Seiko isn't giving me that, I'm sorry, but yeah, you're the problem, not the watch.
Yeah. Sorry, Sam.
No, go on, Mark. No.
The last time I was in a Grand Seiko boutique, the guy behind the counter, he knew he wasn't going to sell to me or anybody else I was with that day. But he'd worked for one of the big Swiss watch companies in retail, and he's going, the Grand Seiko customers are very, very different.
Yeah.
They are timekeeping obsessed. They, if it don't tell the time properly, by which they mean a few tenths of a second a day, they will complain and demand that it does. That's quite often by the Grand Seiko's own customers, how they are judged first. We know, as part of the broader community, we tend to judge them by the dials and get bored by just the dial variations. But the people who buy them and love them judge them for the quality as timekeepers and maybe the polishing. But they are, it's an unusual customer compared to the general Swiss watch customer, or a different customer, rather.
Yeah,
I mean, I was going to say, which is probably why Seiko don't experience problems with the idea of very expensive Seikos that overlap with Grand Seiko, because coming from the outside, we say, why would you do that? They're competing with each other. You're taking customers off each other. But maybe Seiko know they are, in fact, completely different customers. That the kind of person who buys that $5,000 Marine Master is never going to buy a Grand Seiko. And the kind of person who buys a Grand Seiko is never actually going to buy that Marine Master.
And the kind of person who buys a Grand Seiko probably thought they bought one as a cheap alternative to something they were on a wait list for, then discovered they loved it and don't care about the wait list. That seems to be happening.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a Grand Seiko Quartz, and I've also got a Rolex. I would say Grand Seiko, try them on, because I bought one, sight unseen, and the cases on those they're horribly balanced. Rolex, any day of the week, their cases are better balanced than that one. This one's much better because it's quartz. So just try it on. I think the case shapes are different. But you're right, Mark. I think I would have bought one sooner if they had lume on the sports watches.
It just depends what you want. I've seen them enough times to be full of admiration for them. So you hold one in your hand and you go, oh yeah, that's amazing, but I don't want it.
Yeah.
It's that kind of watch for me. They are amazing in hand in real life. I don't want one. Nothing wrong with that.
I think the Grand Seiko sports watches are the Cellini line of Grand Seiko.
They are certainly lost.
They're kind of lost. It's not their happy place. It's not their home ground.
And yet
it's not where you get the best.
It was something they used to do very well, and then they off-roaded themselves a bit. You know,
I don't think I've ever seen a Grand Seiko sports watch I thought was really good.
Yeah, like the Prospex LX models. I'm like really interested to see one in person, but I know that I would have to see it in person because I can't tell. I can't judge a picture of it online, even though they're titanium and they do look good. But okay. So anyway, next question, which is this is right up your street, Mark. Do you think accuracy is affected by zero gravity? Thinking of the Speedmaster, better or worse, or no change at all?
No, it's hand wound.
Can you explain that? Because of the balance, there's still a moving parts, isn't there? There's still the balance wheel or the regulation in there. It's not affected at all.
It's all done by tension, though, isn't it? So it's not floating around in relation to itself. It still has mass, even if it doesn't have weight. So that's the important consideration. It still has mass rather than weight. So after all this time and after all the tests NASA did, the last test they could have done, because you couldn't do it on the Earth, would be accuracy. You don't see any complaints. And I can't think of any reason why accuracy would be affected by zero gravity, because parts in zero gravity have mass. It's so they still have inertia. It's weight they don't have. Weight is mass times pull of gravity. So as far as I know, and from a physics and vectors point of view, I can't see any reason why taking gravity out of the equation would make any difference to accuracy.
No, I'm the same. I can't. If I walk through the physics, I can't think of why it would make any difference. It makes a tourbillon even more pointless.
Well, yes, because that's designed to deal with gravity.
Because that's designed to deal with gravity, and I think maybe there's the giveaway. I mean, gravity can have an effect on a normal watch, generally a pocket watch. If you take away the gravity, take away the need for a tourbillon, everything I'd expect would work largely as designed. I can't imagine why it would have any impact.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think there's a comment now. People talk about having, tests in multiple positions. Well, the positions don't make any sense in zero gravity. There are no positions.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, great question. And then John asks, there was mention before of the rehabilitation of Quartz. Is there a chance that Swatch collaboration will lead Omega to doing a proper Quartz men's watch again? Seamaster 300 Quartz. So they have the Skywalker, don't they? The X33, but they don't have any Quartz.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. I think Quartz is being rehabilitated, but has it got to the point where, for example, Tag still cops a bit of criticism for the fact that an Aqua Racer can come in a Quartz version or a mechanical version. But Tag's happy, they don't want to appeal to the kind of person who's snobby about that sort of thing. But Omega might not have that flexibility. So Omega might, like Rolex, the person who buys a Rolex doesn't want a Quartz Submariner to even exist. If it did exist, they would not want a Submariner at all. And I think the Seamaster might experience that same problem, that by making a Quartz Seamaster available, you'll diminish the Seamaster line in the eyes of people that want a mechanical
one. As a counterpoint, up until March 2018, there were Quartz Seamasters. The modern line of Seamasters started in 1993. We call them the James Bond line for convenience. They always had Quartz in them up until the current generation of Seamaster. What I don't know is whether Omega was seeing sales drop off of that Quartz line.
Yeah,
that's what I don't know. But for them to solely go to, suddenly when they did the current generation of Seamaster, they went to one size that was bigger and no quartz. So
yeah,
they can't be that, 2018, was the small watch craze going then? Not really.
no.
But, the 40 and the 38s and the quartzes are gone. And to be honest, I don't think they'll be back in the next generation, which I think will be out next year, but I'm quite happy to be wrong.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, it's really tricky here. We're kind of guessing about what was happening with Omega marketing. So, and it's impossible to know. You need to get some like actual data, marketing data and feedback from the retailers. But my gut feel would be, were I the Seamaster product line manager and someone was saying, we really want to get a quartz watch out there, I would consider it, but we're talking about the rehabilitation of quartz. I would do so in a way where you got something unique from that quartz ability. So it would not be 1 cent cheaper. It would be exactly the same price as the mechanical watch. So I am not under any circumstances creating a cheaper option. So then what I would be doing is saying, well, what added value can I get into that $7,000 watch by making it quartz? And so the quartz version would be chronometer certified. I'd be tempted to get in bed with METAS and come up with a METAS certification for quartz watches, and do that. And it would have a perpetual calendar, and it would have all these other things that you can do for $6,000 in a high quality quartz watch that you can't do in a mechanical watch.
You just give me a very good idea, Pete. They could come out with a quartz watch that has the correct date after January the 1st, 2100. You ever notice how all perpetual calendars run to December 31st, 2099?
No, I didn't.
No,
I didn't know.
Is it one of these every 400-year things?
Every 400 years, the year with 2 zeros at the end is only a leap year every 400 years. So year 2000 was a leap year. Year 2100 won't be. But they're all the perpetual calendars are set up for a 4-year cycle. So
there's a very
esoteric point, but hey, I was thinking on the fly, so I can come up with.
There's a very special name for those. Is it Gregorian, or there's a very specific name for the 3 or 4 watches in the world that do cater for that 400-year shift.
Bloody expensive. I don't think that's a very special name.
Yeah, it's pretty bougie.
Yeah.
So it's sorry.
Oh, so I think the Furlan Mari GPHG entry this year has that function.
But does it look like a Patek?
Of course.
Oh, well then, who cares? It's going to be hard to keep a straight face in front of Furlan Mari in October. That's all I can say.
Yeah. So, actually, David's saying there are some mechanical watches like that. They're called sector perpetual calendar.
Secular. Yes.
Secular. Okay.
Secular.
Oh, thank you, David.
Yes. Yeah, I knew there was a word for it. I couldn't remember what it was. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, okay. Next question, Jeremy's saying, why aren't more limited editions simply adding or subtracting the date functionality? I'd buy a no-date El Primero or Chronomaster, no question.
Is it worth the cost of the engineering to take out the ghost date position? That's possibly the only reason. If you're making, if you have to add on 50 or 100 watches to a batch of 1,000, but you've suddenly got to engineer a ghost position out. Yes, you may know how to do it, but you've still got to make those modifications. Will you get your money back on a limited edition?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's just engineering cost point. Yeah, just a guess.
Yeah, you end up with the Porsche RSR problem of a Porsche RSR lightweight has less of everything than a normal Porsche and costs 20% more. I'm not, because of all the things Mark just mentioned, taking things out and messing with an established production line, even if you're just taking stuff out, actually costs money. So what you'd end up doing is selling objectively less functional watches at more expensive prices, and I think that would struggle.
Yeah, I don't know this for a fact, but is it only Rolex that offer a date and no date in their production line? I can't think of another. Oh, I suppose the Polaris has a date and no date, but it's not the same watch, is it?
Not quite the same watch. Breitling used to. Breitling used to do limited editions of their Super Ocean that didn't have a date. Most of them were dates.
Oh, the Iron Man one didn't have a date, did it?
Yeah.
There are Omega, current generation Omega Seamaster with
the Seamaster,
Seamaster 300s, the 300M. The vast majority, anything that's 42 millimeter has a date. But if you looked at the titanium tantalum, that's no date. The ceramic titanium is no date.
Yeah.
They tend to
but you wouldn't find a standard white dial, black bezel 42 with and without a date. Right?
Yeah, and the Tudor, of course, the Black Bay Heritage has the black ceramic with that's no date, and then they do a date one as well at the silver and gold. Or I don't know.
And the blank swatch. 3 of them have dates.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, the blank ones. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's rare that Rolex do what they do. Here's exactly the same watch, date, no date. Most companies do a slight variation. So there's a Polaris, but it's a slightly different watch. Breitling again with their B0 Premiers. There are the 42s have got dates, the 40s don't, I think. So yeah, there's little quirks like that.
Yeah. Okay. So next question is, this might be, I don't know. I think Pete, you've got a tuner, haven't you? So Sympathy for Bezel is saying Ecozilla versus tuner. So I mean, I've reviewed the Ecozilla and it's massive. It's massive, but it's still wearable. But the tuner comes in different sizes, doesn't it? Not all tuners are the same, are they?
There is a mini tuner, but yeah, I like them both. I don't like the left-hand crown because I wear my watches on the right side and I like the crown away from my hand. So that's actually been a reason why I haven't bought the Ecozilla. If I was a right-hander, so wore my watches on the other side though, that then becomes a bonus. That green one I keep toying with buying, but
yeah, I liked it. Yeah.
They operate at slightly different levels too. If you've got them both in your hand, which I have had, one is $1,000 plus watch and the other one is a $500 watch. They are built to a different standard. They are selling to a different person.
Yeah, and also it has the only thing that's slated it on is it looks like it has like a locking ring, but it isn't. It doesn't move. I think it's just coming back to me now, but. Okay, so let's see what other questions we've got here. So Dion Perry says, doesn't Prince William wear a Seamaster quartz? I know it was Prince the King Charles's watch, wasn't it, that he handed it down to him?
No, I thought it was a gift from his mum or something.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Yeah, I think he might be right though. Something's coming back to me. Let's have a look. Oh yeah. So I don't.
Yeah.
Any watch I haven't, Mark. I don't know if you've probably done some, haven't you? Any watch factory tours you guys would recommend? I hear this is great.
So the only one I know of, and I don't know if it actually still happens. If you find yourself in Biel-Bienne, there is the Omega Museum. They used to say that you could do a factory tour if you were visiting the museum, but you had to ask in person in advance. I don't know if that's still the case. The Omega Museum itself, still on one of my list of places to go, but every time we get close to going to Switzerland, the wife changes her mind. Can't think why. But certainly BLBN, you'd have the Omega Museum, and then a lot of, I believe, if you ask in advance, Armin Strom might do a one-person tour, particularly if you're, if they think you're about to be a customer or are a customer, they will do a tour, but you have to ask in advance. Beyond that, no.
I have heard that they're getting less and less common. I'm in Australia, so it's not like I'm nipping across to go to one. So they're very much someone else's thing, but I have heard that they're actually quite uncommon these days.
So I've only ever done the Seiko Museum, which is in Ginza in Tokyo, and that's not technically a factory tour, but it's very, very good if you like Seiko. Really good. Okay, so let's have a look. So
sorry, couldn't help you there, SJ.
Yeah, sorry, SJ. Yeah, thanks for all the questions though. Dave Rube says, "What's the most exciting and popular recent Swiss watch? The Cartier Tank Solar Beat." I wonder if he's asking about Quartz, but I don't know. What is the most exciting, popular, recent luxury Swiss watch? Would you say?
Depends how you define popularity, doesn't it? If popularity is defined by which one sells the most, don't have the numbers. If you go which one has had the most social media attention, well, brands go in and out of fashion. You basically have to say that anything by the Teflon brand that is MB&F. I mean, Cartier are going through a renaissance at the moment. Can't stand them myself, but they are certainly going through a renaissance.
You've seen a lot of Santoses on TV, aren't you? I've been seeing a lot more.
I was saying this is and the cycle is getting very fast. So I saw a lot of buzz around when Cartier came out with the Solar Beat, and there was a lot of discussion about the fact that they were hard to get for a while. But if I go back through my Feedly comment, and if I do look at Feedly content, if I do look at Instagram, don't see much buzz about them at all anymore. The Santos was a real darling watch about a year and a half ago. Everyone had to have one. Everyone had to get hold of one, but they're not. I've got the feeling like everyone who wants a Santos has now got it, and we're all just moving on. And that's the problem. I've got this feeling that no watch is exciting except for a couple of months. So you know what? The most exciting watch, far and away, with no doubt whatsoever, Moonswatch. It is the only watch which is still generating any kind of hype and discussion and content. 18 months after it was released?
I actually saw my first Moonswatch in real life today.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I was in the office, and the other watch guy walked past, and I noticed what I thought was a Moonswatch on his wrist, and I go, "Where's your Glasutra original?" And he's going, "Oh no, I was in New York in Times Square escorting my wife's family around. So I popped into the Swatch boutique, and they had 3 or 4 different ones, and so I bought this one."
Wow.
And he had the Pluto, which has got the sort of the purple.
Oh, that's the one I want.
And he's going, he's a corporate lawyer. He could afford the state of New Jersey if he wanted to. But he's going, yeah. I mean, for what it is, recognize it for what it is. I thought it was fun, and I like it. And he took off his Glasutra original to put a Moonswatch on. So
yeah, so far and away,
impact they can have. They are, if you get them, you like them. And yeah, they're the only Swiss watch that's had any impact 18 months further on, and they're still in short supply.
And the Black Pan 50 fathoms as well. Probably is the most popular recent luxury Swiss watch. Arguably, if you could call it luxury, but
maybe that's the future for luxury brands. It's not the Rolex Tudor relationship. It's not about having a brand that sits just underneath you. Maybe the future of luxury brands is to have someone that is 1 to 2 orders of magnitude cheaper than your watch. So, you have a $10,000 watch and a $200 watch, not a $10,000 watch and a $6,000 watch.
Yeah. Von Krull saying the Blancpain Swatch Blancpain hype seems to be dying a lot more quickly.
Oh, absolutely, it will.
Yeah, but it does make you wonder. It was all the fascination that people had about why these monster lines were outside boutiques back in March 22 that created a mystique that still hasn't worn off. And the Blancpain or the Blanc Swatch didn't create that buzz because we'd seen it before. So
exactly,
chap I spoke to said he didn't even ask because he thought it was probably pointless just a couple of weeks after launch about the Blanc Swatch, that thing. But I suspect they're still in short supply, but I don't know that they'll be in short supply for 18 months.
Yeah, I might go it this weekend now that there's one. It's only been open a couple of months, but there's one near me, so I might go in and see.
Yeah. I don't think they're trying to. I don't think you can measure success of the Swatch Blancpain collab as did they replicate the Moon Swatch. That's never going to happen. That's an utterly unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, that's good. Well, before we go, I there's a couple. I had a news story actually. It goes back to our vintage one, but I don't know if anybody saw. Did you see this Freddie Mercury's watch?
Oh, I did. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I saw the story. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's his because we were talking about pulse watches, weren't we? Was it Dave that had the pulse watch?
Dave had one. Yeah.
Sunday. Yeah. So this sold for £35,000. So this was the one he actually wore, and they haven't got the picture of, but I've seen some stage pictures. But in the article, it said that they used to be able to pick these up on eBay for $200, and I was like, can you? And there is someone on. So if you're a Freddie Mercury fan and you want to get a pulsometer Seiko, yeah, $215 burning a hole in your pocket. I mean, that's not the red one, but I think there is a couple of red ones on there. But I think that's quite a good. I suppose that's the interesting thing about watches, isn't it? And I suppose other fashion in general, that you can actually.
I hope for the auction house that the provenance is bomb-proof.
Well, I mean, they could DNA, I mean, this, I don't know, this is weird. But could they DNA
that would,
watch?
They could, but it would be creepy.
Yeah. If they had
get the wrist cheese off and DNA it. No, thank you.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, one of the watch, there's an archaeologist that can, what do they use a laser to age things, or like mummies and stuff they can work out.
Yeah, there's a similar, totally different article, but in the same vein around dead rich people's watches that have come onto the market. Did anyone else read the story about? It was a Hodinkee story about John Lennon's watch.
Oh yeah, because isn't there some sort of huge court case over it?
Yeah, so this is
trying to decide who owns it.
This is why there's a special ring in hell for all auctioneers, and a lot of watch dealers. Basically, there's this reading between the lines. The watch dealer, the watch house, the auction house, everyone knew the watch was stolen, but it was in their interests to pretend that they didn't know, or they weren't sure. And so people have been trading this watch backwards and forwards on the lowdown. And it's only when it finally popped up in public that Yoko Ono realized someone had stolen it from her.
Oh, really? So they didn't steal it off his wrist as he was.
No. So the story seems to be that her driver or someone that she fired had stolen a whole bunch of stuff from her over the years and was quietly leaking it out. And this was a watch she kept as a memento, not as something she wore. And so it was just locked away in a safe and she didn't think about it until one day, out of the blue, she got a phone call, someone wanting to talk about, her ex-husband's watch, which is now up for sale. And she said, "What are you talking about? It's in my safe." And then it wasn't there.
Yeah, Lennon's widow, Yoko Ono.
Yeah, and reading between the lines, everyone that was trading that watch knew it was stolen, but they're quite happy to keep trading it.
That's wild, isn't it? That's absolutely wild, because you'd think that somebody would have the moral. I suppose it's a sunk cost fallacy, isn't it? If you've paid for it and then afterwards you realize it's stolen, like what do you do? Because you've paid, hundreds of thousands for it, possibly.
Yeah, and they're saying this could be the most expensive watch ever if it does come on the market. It could conceivably go past the Steve McQueen. Not the Steve McQueen. What's the other one? The other actor.
Yeah, the Newman. So
because it's fundamentally a more interesting watch as well.
Yeah, so he basically took. Yeah, so he threatened her. It looks like he had some photos and stuff. Threatened her for $2 million.
Yeah, when someone questions how you got a watch and you respond by blackmailing them, that is not a vote in your favor.
Yeah, that's not in the Patek marketing, is it? This, you only keep hold of it so you can blackmail people. No, you only keep hold of it so you can pass it on to another generation.
Yeah, you never actually own a Patek because someone might have photos of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you need to barter it for to get yourself out of trouble. So, actually, funny, Dave corrected himself. I think his earlier question about the thing was, "What's the most exciting quartz watch?" But we accidentally answered it because you said the moon swatch.
Yeah, the moon swatch.
So we accidentally answered the right question. So, let's see if we've got any other questions. Was there? We've probably got like 3 minutes left. What else were we looking at? Did you want to delve into this one, Pete? This.
In 3 minutes, quickly. It's an interesting poll. Sam and Mark, do you find yourself interested in watches that you can't afford, that you're never really going to be able to afford, that are horrendously expensive, or do you just flick over them? I thought this was an interesting article.
It depends on the watch. I don't.
Yeah,
I mean, sort of. I know I can't. I know there's a lot of watches I can afford. There's a lot of watches, and there's far more watches I can't afford. I find a lot of them are vaguely ridiculous, which means I pass them on. It's not because of the price; it's because they suck.
Yeah,
I think they just don't meet my tastes at all. So
I think there's an element of,
but it's not the price; it's the ridiculousness of them.
Well, I think that goes hand in hand. It's because it's kind of I kind of share that view. There's a lot of, I take Jacob & Co's, which I find are just really horrible. But on the other hand, if I look at something like, and I'm probably going to get a contract taken out on me for saying this, if I look at something like a Dufour Simplicity, I think that's a joke. I think that such a simple watch with so little art behind it, shit tins of craft, vast amounts of craft, but so little kind of art. Why would people pay that kind of money? I don't understand. And that's where it's this weird thing. Personally, when it comes to hyper expensive watches, I find myself, it's all head but no heart. I'm not invested in them. I find them interesting. They say interesting things about the business. They say interesting things about design and where what might become, affordable one day.
About society as well.
And about society. So they're intellectually interesting, but I don't feel any emotions when I see them. inspire any feeling for me.
How about you, Sam?
Yeah, no, I'm the same actually. These hyper expensive watches, and also, I mean, I have to answer this as yes, I do like watches that I can't afford, because I've made this argument against homage watches, like brands like Steinhardt and Pagani and stuff like that, where people have commented, well, you know, some people can't afford the original. I'm like, that's okay. Those watches are the originals, and they can exist in a time period that you don't have to own them to in order to. You don't have to own a copy in order to, you know, show your love for the original, I guess, is a thing. So it is my idea. So, yeah, I do like these. But again, even if I had the money for something like this, for example, this Audemars Piguet, even if I was very rich, I would feel very uncomfortable about wearing a watch this expensive. I don't know. There's just something about it that I just...
I can only think of one hyper expensive watch that I might actually want to wear, and that's the Omega Central Tourbillon.
Okay,
it's a very, very simple dress watch. It used to be $250,000. It's probably 300,000 now, but I can't, you know, because it's such a simple aesthetic design. You know, if I think of a watch that, hey, I could save for 20 years for and afford, you're back to the white gold, the Canopus Speedmaster. But, you know, the hyper expensive, the Hublots, MB&Fs, Futalainen.
There's one on a dealer, yeah.
There are lots of different flavors of them, I think.
Okay.
But, yeah. That's
yeah,
not
the better
one
ones aren't. The better one's just plain black, and I think enamel dial.
Yeah.
Second picture along on your that one. I think it looks best in that plain black.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
Blue.
Oh wow.
I mean, there are watches there I like, and it is tricky because you in that article, Ariel makes an interesting discussion point that a lot of people, as they got more money, and you can argue about if you grew up with money versus, so your tastes were formed in that way slowly and gradually, versus you've got these very middle class values, but then congratulations, we just gave you $1 billion. You're probably not going to change overnight, but you might find 5 years from now, after you've got really comfortable with having $1 billion in the bank, suddenly, you know, a $100,000 watch isn't that big a deal. So that's tricky. Yeah, I always just find that there's a degree of remoteness. One of Ariel's points here was we in the watch community get a bit, we kind of, I'll call us middleweights, kind of get a little dismissive of heavyweight watch collectors. Like, they're not real watch collectors. They just got the money. And I think part of the problem is that at that level, we all know their watches. All of those watches get plenty of media coverage. None of us here are ever going to buy an MBMF, but we can name most of their models. We can name mostly where they came from. None of us are going to buy a Kari Voonalainen, but we can probably picture what it looks like in our heads.
Or a Richard Mille.
Mille. We're not going to buy them, but we know what they look like. We're familiar with them. There's no surprise. There's no novelty. So whenever you see a heavyweight watch collector's watch collection, it just turns into generic rich guy, because you know all the watches. There's no surprises. There's no hidden gems. There's no, he must be really into watches to know this thing exists, because we all know they exist. But that doesn't work in reverse. We have watches they don't have. We have watches they probably don't even know exist. And so we're in this weird position of, even though we have less money, even though we have less access, we actually know more about watches than they do, because we know all their stuff. They don't know ours. And it's an interesting little quirk.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting. Yeah. This last point. So Jonathan McJohnface says, I had a play with and try another Tourbillon recently. It's stunning. So thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, John. I am very jealous. And on that note,
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for all the questions in the panel, and thanks for the panel answering the questions, and thanks for everyone in the comments asking the questions. Very much appreciated, and we'll see you on Sunday for the Sunday Social. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Have a good one, guys.